Last week we started talking about two concepts, activation and deactivation. And science is pretty easy to understand how those work. If you pour gasoline onto a fire, you activate a reaction and you might die. So don't try that at home. But if you pour water onto a fire, you deactivate it. We also saw that the principle of activation can be applied to our faith. There are things in our life or we experience in our life or we make choices in our life that either activate or deactivate our faith. And we said that sometimes things that seem like faith deactivators can actually activate our faith in a whole new way. Today we're going to talk about something else that I think has huge potential to either destroy our faith or to fuel it. And it's something that every single one of us will experience. When I was 10, my mom got sick really fast. She was in intensive care for about a week, and I remember praying for God to please not let my mom die. But my mom died anyway, and all throughout my childhood and adolescence, I would hear in church that God is good. But my mom's death put this solid wrench in that belief. How could God be good, yet allow my mom to die? I was wrestling with some serious doubts. Now, for some of us, doubt is a good description of how we feel about our faith right now. And the truth is, all of us will experience doubt in our faith at some point. It doesn't always happen the same way for everyone, but each one of us experience some level of doubt. Because doubt is what happens when what we see and experience doesn't line up with what we believe. And it creates questions, sometimes really difficult questions. And if faith is supposed to be about having all the right answers and being sure of everything, then doubt and faith don't seem like they line up or fit at all. Maybe you grew up really sure about what you believed, but then a professor in college started poking holes at what the Bible said. Or maybe it was a family member or a friend who made you question. Doubt crept in and you wondered if you have just gotten everything all wrong. For some of us, doubt didn't creep in slowly. Something happened in our lives and doubt knocked down the door and started flipping over the furniture. I have friends like me whose family members have died suddenly, and they're trying to figure out how something so awful could happen to their mom or to their son or to their grandparent. What do you say to a friend who is hurting? And answer the question of why God would allow such tragedy. For you, it might be a meltdown in your family that's making you question. Or your parents are growing older and you're facing a new set of challenges that you have no idea how to navigate. Maybe you've lost your job right now and you're asking God, how could you let this happen? All of these circumstances can cause doubt, and doubt has a way of deactivating faith. And maybe that's why some of us have been taught that doubt is a bad thing, especially when it comes to our faith. We were told that we always need to be sure about what we believe and why we believe, or else we weren't sure about God. But what if faith is not about having all the right answers and having everything all figured out? What if faith is more about a real relationship with God that gets more real when we have questions? What if doubt didn't deactivate our faith, but instead made it grow? Last week, we talked about how incredibly transparent and honest the Bible is about the weaknesses and the failings of its most important people, including those who were Jesus' closest friends. But not only did they make mistakes and fail, they also struggled with doubt. But that doubt didn't destroy their faith. In fact, it had the opposite effect. There's a story in the book of Matthew where the disciples took a boat ride across the Sea of Galilee, a huge lake located in Israel. Jesus had gone up to the mountainside by himself to pray, and he told the disciples that he would catch up with them later. Now, I bet the disciples assumed that they would meet up with Jesus on land. But Jesus decided to meet up with them in the middle of the lake. This is how Matthew describes it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." So let's be clear on this. Jesus' friends were terrified. The situation freaked them out. They thought Jesus was a ghost, and you can't blame them. They were in the middle of a sea storm, and there was one time-tested, cold, hard fact. People cannot walk on water. The only safe place to be is in a boat, and Jesus wasn't in one. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Peter made an incredible request. He asked Jesus, he says, "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." And what's even crazier is Jesus' response. "Come," he said. So now we have one of the greatest moments of faith you could ever imagine. In the middle of a lake with waves crashing around him, Peter steps out of the boat and starts walking toward Jesus. You'd think that this was the biggest faith victory of all time, and it was for a few steps. Then reality sunk in. I just got to bet that Peter, the seasoned fisherman, looked down and he realized that what was happening around him was physically impossible. Water isn't a stable walking surface. And then all these restless waves, it was just too much. And just like that, doubt gripped Peter. And he became so afraid. And just as if it was like fear were like bricks that were tied around his feet, Peter started to sink. But this was a game-changing moment for Peter. As his doubt dragged him down into the water, Peter did the very best thing he could do in the moment. He called out to Jesus to save him. In the middle of his doubt and fear, Peter reached out to Jesus. "Lord, save me," he yelled. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" Jesus was right there to grab Peter's hand and to save him. Despite Peter's doubts, Jesus reached out. Now, this is where tone matters a lot. You can read these words of Jesus. "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" And you can hear judgment and anger in his words. But if Jesus wanted to teach Peter a lesson about doubting, he could have just let him keep sinking. Jesus could have given Peter a little serves you right lesson, let him flounder around in the water for a while. But Jesus didn't. The Bible tells us that as soon as Peter cried out for him, that Jesus helped his friend. As we get to know Jesus, we see that he never put people to shame because they doubted or questioned. He didn't do that with Peter, and he doesn't do that with us. Peter learned something about Jesus he could have never have learned without this experience of doubt. He could cry out to Jesus to help him in any situation, and Jesus wouldn't leave. In the middle of Peter's doubts, Jesus was on the stormy water with him. And when Peter doubted, Jesus didn't turn and walk away. He didn't abandon his friend in disgust, nor did he leave Peter to sink to teach him some kind of lesson about disbelief. Peter learned a valuable truth. His doubt didn't scare Jesus, not one single bit. Matthew goes on to say that when Peter and Jesus got back into the boat, everyone worshiped Jesus. Everyone, including Peter. His experience of doubt activated his faith and moved him closer to Jesus. You see, Jesus is okay with our doubt. In fact, doubt can fuel your faith. So what about you? And what about me? What should we do with our doubts? For one thing, we can decide that our doubts won't keep us away from Jesus. That even when we have questions, big questions, that we won't let them shut down our faith. First, we can share our doubts with Jesus and with others. Kara Powell, a professor at Fuller Seminary, says that doubt isn't toxic to our faith, but unexpressed doubt is. Doubt becomes a deactivator of our faith when we hold it inside, when we choose not to express it. Faith can be activated when we voice our doubts to Jesus and to other Jesus followers who can help us out. Jesus doesn't get mad at us for our doubts. He wants us to reach out to him, even when we're frustrated and confused. Sometimes the best prayer is like Peter's. "Lord, save me." We can also express our doubt to people who we trust. This is where a small group like the one you're sitting in right now can be so important. Find people who you can be honest with about your doubts and about your fears. Second, we can keep our focus on what we know about Jesus. In the middle of difficult and confusing circumstances, it's easy to focus only on the things we don't know. Like, I don't know why people get cancer and some people don't. I don't know how to prove that everything in the Bible is accurate. I don't know why my mom passed away. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or even the rest of today. But there's a lot I do know about Jesus and what he's done for me. And I'm guessing you do too. So here's something that you can try. Make a list of what you know to be true about Jesus and what he's done for you. It doesn't have to be a perfect list. It's just for you. Write down what you've learned about Jesus, the ways he's shown up in other people's lives and in the world around you. Write down how you experienced him in your own life. And when you have doubt creeping in or kicking down the door, pull out that list and remind yourself of what you know is true about Jesus. The reality about doubt is this. When you go to Jesus, you might not get answers to your questions. He may not give you insight into why he's allowing what he's allowing. But when you go to Jesus and you share your doubts with him, you'll find what Peter found. He's right there with you. He's not mad at you, and he's not leaving you. You might not get answers, but you will get him. Even as Peter doubted, there was one thing he learned that was true. Jesus was there for him. Faith is about trusting God and having a relationship with him so that when we're unsure and we're afraid, we can go to him and he will meet us there. And those moments can actually activate our faith. Imagine if we didn't have to be afraid of doubt and it was even okay to express our doubt. I think we'd be much more likely to invite Jesus into those areas where we have a lot of questions. We'd want to involve Jesus in our families and in our workplace and those areas of our lives that are difficult and confusing. We'd bring up the hard questions knowing that Jesus would be totally okay with that. No matter where you are in your faith journey, you will experience doubt at some point. But those doubts don't have to deactivate your faith in Jesus. They can activate it if you let them draw you closer to him, because Jesus is okay with your doubts.